Jameis is much better at hashtag team sex. And we are talking about throwing it deep.
Yeah, chicks dig the long ball, Jax, but it appears that Jameis has been left with a box of Kleenex and a bottle of Jergens here.
He's got to just squat down in the corner, holding his knees and sort of rock back and forth and watch the action happen. That's what he's got to do. And it's Russell Wilson just with his hand over his head, just, raw dogging it. That's what's happened.
Sights and sounds and edges found, you will now get down with the Underground. The show that goes to the depths of the Dynasty landscape. The Dynasty Underground is back. I am Trav, hosting and West Coastin', joining you from the Undroppables YouTube channel. Please go and subscribe there. Make sure you follow us on social media at the Undroppables, and all of the other sweet nothings can be found in that episode description. Joining me tonight, you might notice a little bit of a difference. I've got the wise man, Jax Falcone. Jax Joe is not with us tonight. He, the aristocrat himself, is probably at some form of conference on fine dining, maybe like a seminar on the most elegant dishes to come out of the state of Iowa or something like that. So you and I can be proper pieces of shit on tonight's episode if we absolutely please, Jax. Are you ready?
He's eating foie gras at a polo tournament meeting or something like that. Yes, he's super aristocratic right now.
Never even heard of it. Perfect. Yeah. Awesome, Jax. Yeah, it's going to be fun. It almost feels a little bit like the old days when I first kind of jumped in with the Undroppables, and I was jumping on the undrafted a little bit more often, except tonight I'm the captain running the ship, except we know how it's going to go. We're both going to be throwing shit back and forth tonight, Jax. It's going to be a really good time. Of course, make sure that you go check out the social media for that Discord channel, as we have opened that up for free. Trying to build some of that community, so please get in there and start chatting ball with people. Had good results, lots of people getting in there chatting, and we just want to keep growing it. So go check it out on our social media. And Jax, tonight, kind of wanted something easy and free flowing. It's just the two of us. We're letting our hair down a little bit without, that classy Mr. Joe Quavius Kuvatakis with us. So we're just going to kind of talk about some of these draft landing spots for some of these players. So we're going to get into, some positional landing spots, maybe some team specific stuff. Maybe we're going to roll through some of these rounds. It's going to be a fun episode, nice and flowy. Does a little bit remind me of a bit of an undrafted show, Jax, with kind of that free flowing format. And Jax, I think we need to fast forward a little bit through the first round here, past the first pick, which is, as consensus, going to be Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans. I think while that is super fantasy impactful, we're going to like Cam Ward for our super flex teams. But I think as far as everyone else in the Titans offense, we need a little bit more stuff to happen there to be investing into that offense. At 2, we've got the Cleveland Browns. I think it could be Abdul Carter, because I think him alongside Myles Garrett would be an absolute nightmare for teams, to be determined. But I think we need to start at pick 3 with the New York Giants, Jax, because a few days ago was an exciting day. It was like free agency Christmas for us. We've been waiting for this shoe to drop, this W to drop, this crab to be stolen for weeks now. And one Jameis Winston.
How do you do the eating W's thing?
Something like that, yeah. And then
you got it. Look at you.
He just mauled it. Well, we are West, y'all. West, right?
Yeah.
Jameis Winston signed with the New York Giants.
Yeah.
Neighbors, truthers were through the roof. Jameis Winston fans were excited to see him land, and things were looking up for the Giants.
Yeah.
And then what happened today, Jax? Mere days later, we are recording this on Tuesday night. Tell us.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Wilson just, came in and sat in the captain's chair and relegated Mr. Winston to his cuck corner. And there he is. He's got to just squat down in the corner, holding his knees and sort of rock back and forth and watch the action happen. That's what he's got to do. And it's Russell Wilson just with his hand over his head, just, raw dogging it. That's what's happened. That's what's happened.
Yeah.
And let's just say that we think that Jameis is much better at hashtag team sex And we are talking about throwing it deep.
Yeah. Chicks dig the long ball, Jax.
That's what
Chicks
I'm
dig the
saying.
long ball. But it appears that Jameis has been left with a box of Kleenex and a bottle of Jergens here. And
Yes.
it sucks. Like,
That's
what are
where
they
we're
going to
at.
do? What are they going to do here? Because I think Jameis brings higher upside for the weapons as, fantasy nerds and virgins that we are. We want to
Yeah.
see that. We love the chaos theory there. But I think for control in your offense and maybe ability to win games with a defense that got a lot better last season, I think maybe Russell Wilson could be that option. But then we've been talking about them all draft season as being a prime landing spot for a guy like Shadur Sanders or whatever in the draft at 3. So does this preclude them from taking a quarterback in the draft, do you think? Like, do you think one of these guys could just be dropped to free agency kind of later in the process if they bring a rookie in?
I think it's a Travis Hunter landing spot, and I'll tell you why. Um, Mara, whatever, the owner, was quoted and on film saying, I am growing very impatient with this, and it needs to get turned around fast. Otherwise, there's going to be problems. And I assume that's a veiled threat at Joe Shane, however you pronounce his dumbass name, and and the head coach, right? I think that's what we're looking at here. I think that's where, so those guys are on the hot seat, and I do not think that they for one moment would tolerate a rookie quarterback as part of that plan to save their asses.
Good
I
point.
think that's why they brought in 2 veterans. One way or the other, they need to figure this thing out right now. And of course, this is a terrible plan. This is organizational, blasphemy. This is just awful. Like, they're doing all the wrong things. They're doing it the wrong way. Like, there's no connection. It's basically like, the owner's just like, fix it now or else. And it's like, that's never worked in the NFL. It's always been long-term plan, build the trenches, make sure you have a great team. And then you can actually put almost any above average quarterback in there and you can win. Look at the early Patriots. Look at the Brock Purdy led Niners. There's countless situations where, Joe Flacco, all these Trent Dilfer, there's
Jalen
always been
Hurts.
guys, Jalen Hurts, that's right. I mean, they probably could have won with lesser quarterback than even Jalen Hurts. So yeah, you see it every year, the teams that are able to win. Look at the Detroit led, Jared Goff, Jared Goff, not elite, but looks pretty elite behind an elite offensive line with, all sorts of weapons all around him. So they're not building the right way. But I do think the win now piece is going to be Travis Hunter. And, you could sort of see it, right? The Travis Hunter would play some offense alongside Malik Neighbors with, unfortunately, Russell Wilson trying to figure this out. I mean, we'll see about whether or not he
Imagine
can
Jameis,
win.
though,
That's what I'm saying. Well, this
with
is it. I
Hunter
mean,
and
obviously for
Neighbors.
fantasy, yeah, for fantasy, it's not even close. And for winning, I think it is close. I think,
I think so,
obviously
too.
they play drastically different. Uh, Russell Wilson is team missionary sex, and Jameis is throwing it deep. Let's just say that,
Oh, buddy.
you know what I mean? He's getting every angle on the deep penetration long ball. But seriously, I mean, he does. He's never seen a gap he can't thread, right? A needle he can't thread, right? I mean, not to go full. Whew, I mean, it's getting to be quite a show. But honestly, I mean, even though they will perform in different ways, I think the winning percentage or the winning, the chances they do anything positive is about the same with either guy.
Yeah.
Not
And
good.
I think what they need to do is just trust in their offensive minded head coach, Brian Dable, who has a history with a quarterback that was previously kind of labeled as a wild quarterback in Josh Allen, was able
Yeah.
to help him rein it in a little bit. Obviously, I think Dable played a big part in the
Yeah.
ascension of Josh Allen, even to where he is now.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think he can necessarily do that with Jameis to that level because Jameis is not the athlete that Josh Allen was. But like, do the right thing, Giants. Just do the right thing. And I think
They
for
won't.
fantasy, like either way, Malik Neighbors is going to be just fine. I think Travis Hunter
Yeah.
coming in, if he's like a 50% offense player or less, then I think great. That's all good, but he's not going to be something we want for fantasy. If we
Right.
know he's coming in as a wide receiver with Russell Wilson alongside Malik Neighbors, I'm going to be maybe a little bit more hesitant to anoint him as the wide receiver 1, depending on other landing spots. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he has
That's
that
not awesome, but
absolute
right. Yeah.
target
Yeah.
soaker. But I think that's
Yeah.
kind of fun. Like if he isn't going to play offense or not going to play enough for us to care, I think that's a fine landing spot because he doesn't hurt a guy like Malik Neighbors and he doesn't go in there having us aching for him to be the wide receiver one on a team that doesn't have one. So I think like
Right.
we can kind of allow our heartstrings to breathe easy if he does land there and play cornerback. I mean, maybe not me as an Eagles fan necessarily, but I think always up for the challenge, of course.
Yeah. I wouldn't be too worried about the Giants as an Eagles fan.
No, absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
So we're gonna go to your Patriots, Jax.
Yeah.
Lots has
Yeah.
happened there, especially as of today.
Yeah.
They pick, of course, at 4 in the draft, and today they signed one Stephon Diggs to a much bigger contract than I thought he was going to see, Jax. 3 years
Totally.
and a real nice 69 mil,
Yeah.
23
Fitting for
million
Diggs
per.
to get 69 mil, isn't it?
Yeah. So all you
I mean,
East Coast
speaking of hashtag
rappers,
team sex,
yeah,
I mean,
all you East Coast rappers in
wow.
Massachusetts better move out of state at this point with that deal
Yeah.
because 23 million per, they'll be flocking to
Yeah, I
Stephon
mean,
Diggs.
hide your girlfriends. I mean, this used to be a family place where, Foxborough, you could bring your hot wives and children and, bring the family in, but I would not be bringing my wife anywhere close to that locker room knowing Steph Diggs is on the prowl. In terms of fantasy, I'm concerned that he's not 100%. I'm also concerned that even if he is 100%, that he wasn't quite his old 100% at the I don't know if he's washed. I wouldn't necessarily say that, but he's certainly not 95% of what he was at his prime. I mean, it's some number less than that, right? I think with the Patriots, it's a 3-year 69, so call it 3-year 23. I think 26 mil is guaranteed, so it's probably a 1-year deal with some guaranteed into year 2. Call it a 1.5-year deal in terms of commitment, and that's fine. I think that's fine. You know what I mean? Like that's fine. Let's just, we've got the cap space now I'm
Yeah,
talking as a Patriots fan. You're like, who the fuck is we?
totally.
But I think it's worth that risk. Cause even if he's 80, 85% of prime Diggs, that's good enough because we don't have anything close to that on the roster.
Totally.
So yeah, I think it's a good match. And if it pans out, great. If not, they can cut their ties after year 1, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was a necessary move for this team, right? They have to have somebody who, at full health, has the ability to take on alpha target volume. And I think Stephon Diggs is still that. I don't think he looked all that terrible in Houston last year before he went down
Right.
with the injury. He just had a bunch of alpha target soakers around him, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's going to look nice actually in as long as he's healthy in New England with Drake May. I think he's just the
Yeah.
kind of receiver who can get open for Drake May. And I think
Yeah.
if we look at what he did for Josh Allen's completion percentage in the first year with Diggs went up over 10%.
Yeah.
He threw over 1,000 more yards here. He threw like 10 more touchdowns or 17 more touchdowns actually with Stephon Diggs in there. So obviously not a direct correlation there. But I think he is a guy that can help one of those young quarterbacks. And I think we're just going to see a changed offense, right?
I will say this, Trav. When I first heard the news, I mean, it's funny how it is because we knew this might happen, but yet when it really happens is when you get the emotional reaction. It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh,
It's hard
yeah.
to give yourself the emotional reaction of it happening until it actually
Totally.
does. So anyway, it happens, and my initial emotional reaction was, God, if I'm holding Diggs, I'm feeling pretty good. Mainly because it was announced as a 3-year, $69 million contract. If it was
Yeah.
a 1-year, $12 million deal, you're like, all right, we'll see here. We'll see what this is all about. But, he got paid. That means he's committed. They're committed to him pretty solidly for this season plus. And in
Totally.
those cases, they're gonna feed it. They're gonna feed it to make sure it they get their money's worth until it's clear that he's cooked, which I don't think he is. So I think he'll be good enough. So I think it's a good time to sell Steph Diggs if you're looking for your window. Now sounds like a great time because I feel pretty confident he's going to see a pretty good target share in this 2025 season at the very least.
I think I might wait a little bit as we get
Sure,
closer to
you can
training
let it
camps and
burn.
stuff
Yeah,
when like reports are coming out that he's more healthy and stuff. Because I think right now, seeing
the
that he's going to
vividness.
that
Yes.
he's going to the Patriots and the recency of his injury. But yeah, I don't mind the spot for like a 2025, but absolutely, you got to be trying to get out
Let's
on
put it
that.
this way, Trav. The window is opened, is my point.
Yeah,
The
when it
window's
was
open.
previously slammed shut
Yes.
previously. And I think this offense is just going to change quite a bit, and I'm excited to see it. And it's playing in to your guys' steadfast ranking of Drake May as a top 10 dynasty quarterback. So bravo to you and Joe for that.
Do you know? Do
Because
you know what else it does for the Patriots, which they weren't at that position before? They can pick anything. They can go with BPA. They can go best player
Mhm.
available throughout their draft. They can choose to trade down. They can choose to trade up. They can do whatever they want. They can just sort of, they can play draft board parkour. They can do whatever they want. They can pick any position. They can just take the best player available. They can do some of the stuff that Philly always does that makes them
Mhm.
so damn good. They're like, look, that guy's here. We'll take him. Let's do it. So they can really do that because they've shored up the defensive line. They've shored up the defensive secondary with Carlton Davis. I mean, this team is like fun now. The offensive line got a little bit of help. I'm sure they're going to be focused on offensive line, but they signed a couple of offensive linemen. They signed the center. They signed Morgan Moses out at right tackle. Look, stopgap, but stopgap nonetheless. So that does give them some patience to do whatever the hell they want, which is cool.
Yeah, for sure. And um, there can be some offensive linemen had in that top of the second round as well. So it's going to be interesting to see
Mm-hmm.
where they go as they try and retool that team. But we're going to go a little bit further down the first round
Mm-hmm.
draft board, kind of linking a player to a team, but then talking about just some landing spots for him in general. And that's Ashton Genty, because he has been largely linked to the Raiders at pick 6 in the first round. And I think that would be a nice little piece to kind of complete their offense going into 2025. I think Ashton Genty would be Pete Carroll's absolute dream in that offense, to be able to funnel 60% of his offense through Ashton Genty. What do you think about him landing in Vegas and potentially their outlook with him? Or do you think that's unlikely and maybe he goes a little bit later down the board?
I'm not sure, actually. That's a good question. I'm not sure where Genty ends up. I think that it's possible that he goes there. I don't know that it's a slam dunk. I think if you're the Raiders, feel like you have more needs. I mean, I feel like maybe even the Bears have more needs. I find it sort of foolish to draft the running back that high when there's other blue chip players on the board. That's just my take. Um, you know, but I know that's not how the NFL thinks. So it's hard for me to actually envision what will happen because it takes a little bit of a suboptimal move to get Genty onto your team in the top 12 or something like that. It just seems too
Mm-hmm.
high. I know that, all the running backs who have been drafted that high always pan out. No shit, because they're awesome and they're
Yeah,
given
because
opportunity.
there's
You know
like
what I mean?
12 of them ever.
Yeah,
And
it's
they're
like I
all
don't think he's.
incredible.
Yeah, it's like when they drafted Gibbs, I was like, it's kind of a mistake, and it's like, well, no, see, he's good. I'm like, well, no, obviously he's good. That wasn't the reason why not to pick him,
Yeah.
but at the same time, we're looking at an NFL that just saw Saquon Barkley almost become the league MVP. Certainly
Yep.
felt like the playoff MVP, like kind of felt pretty important. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a little bit of fool's gold there too, because it's like, again, we talked about how good that team was, but I do think the NFL's copycat league tendencies will show, and I think Genty could go as early as the Raiders. And look, wherever he goes, he's going to get opportunity. It's really what Genty represents is the dominoes, right? Because then, like, if he slides, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, everybody else slides. But if he
Yeah.
goes early, you may see some dominoes start to stack up. You may see 2 or 3 or 4 first round running backs, which would be crazy. If he went to the Raiders, you could see as many as 4 first round running backs potentially.
Yeah, you absolutely could. And we've been kind of wondering the last couple of weeks whether some of these running backs being so plentiful could just end up sliding by nature because teams feel like they can wait until the third or the fourth round. So it's going to be interesting to see how it shakes out and where that domino falls. I think he probably doesn't go any further than, like, what do we think here? We got
Dallas,
Denver at 20, Dallas at 12. Like, I don't think he gets any
yeah,
past that, but like Miami's probably not looking. Colts, no. Atlanta, no. Cardinals, I mean, hard to pass on them. Maybe Bengals. I don't know if they're going to be doing that. I think they're an interesting conversation for a running back, though, now that they've got so many resources sunk into their wide receiver position. I think we might get there as we talk about these second round guys, Jack. So we'll hold off on the Bengals. But nonetheless, it's
yeah,
going to be really interesting to see where Genty falls because he's kind of locked in as the number one for fantasy football no matter where he goes. And as he slips down that board, it kind of just gets better because he goes to a better team who might have a better offense, right? So
yeah.
depending on who picks him and who's already in place there, I think he's kind of like landing spot proof. despite maybe that being a suboptimal move, as you mentioned, Jax. Oh man, there's just so much to talk about here, and like it's hard to determine whether we want to go positional, whether we want to go down the board. I was thinking we could talk maybe about Tyler Warren, just because after kind of that Genty range that we were just talking about is kind of where we get to that Tyler Warren range with him linked a lot to the Colts, sometimes as high as even the Jets at 7. Jax, what's your stance on Warren? Like, do you think he's worth one of those picks? You know that I'm Colston Loveland tight end
I
1,
think
and I think you were at some point as well.
I think Tyler Warren is the NFL tight end 1 by quite a
Mhm.
bit. Like that much I can say because he's, just a better all around football player. I understand the Colson Loveland. Like if he gets first round capital, the fact that he's sort of a receiving only option, that means that whomever drafts him has that type of plan for him. And I could see him outperforming Tyler Warren, in fantasy, but in sort of quote unquote football, I think Tyler Warren's value is only going up in terms of this tight end class because there's not another player that really holds a candle to him in terms of NFL utilization, in my personal opinion. So yeah, he could go as early as 7 to the Jets. Certainly even. I mean, I don't know if they do it, but maybe even the Saints.
Mhm.
Certainly, you could see look, the Cowboys, the 49ers could do it. Certainly, I don't think he's getting past 14
No.
with, the Colts, just the most popular sort of spot for him to go. And one of the most sort of aligned draft picks in all mock drafts is Tyler Warren not sliding by the Colts. So I think that's not a very good landing spot, quite frankly,
No.
for fantasy. So it's gonna be, but he's a great player, so we'll have to just roll with it at that point.
Yeah, maybe he is one of those guys that can just go in there and command targets from all of those guys. I think he would make me question a lot of that Josh Downs love that I have. Josh Downs is going as a value in best ball drafts right now and probably would end up going to value in startups, which is something that we're talking about doing soon, Jax, which I'm so excited about. But
Yes.
I digress. I digress. Yeah, Warren's interesting. I think the Loveland thing for me is just, I don't know if he's not kind of a two-way tight end. You know what I mean? I think a lot of it is he didn't get a ton of opportunities at Michigan um, to show us that he had that. But when he did, he showed us that he can be a good blocker. And it's just whether a team views him that way because the frame is absolutely just like a jump ball basketball tight end. So we shall see. So that's kind of where my stance comes from. But I totally see that. NFL loves them some Tyler Warren. And I
Yeah.
just hope we see that final season of Penn State, Tyler Warren, because for me, the previous to that is not something I would have been super excited about. So, but I mean,
Yeah.
and he showed us shit we've never seen before. So fair enough,
Yep.
Tyler Warren.
Yep.
We talked about that Cowboys landing spot, Jax. They
That's the
pick
one.
at 12. They could be a running back with Genty. They could be a wide receiver with Tet McMillan. I've seen a lot of people have Matthew Golden going there at 12, which would make me very happy on draft day as somebody who's not a big Matthew Golden fan, despite the fact that kind of the things we love about him on tape, if unlocked in the NFL, would be very nice complementary to a guy like CD Lamb. Um,
Absolutely.
do you think they're pulling that trigger at 12 though, or do you think that they have other needs? Like it would be a Jerry pick to pull that trigger.
Wow. I mean, you know how I feel about Matthew Golden. I've had the conversation. I just had Cody Carpentier on the show this week. He's his wide receiver 1. I certainly had the conversation with Matt Kelly last week on the undrafted. This week on the undrafted, we talked to Cody Carpentier about it. I picked his brain, and Cody kind of split the difference. Even though he's his wide receiver 1, he's like, I'm pretty down on the class. So he
Mhm.
was kind of underselling his love for Golden by saying that it's more the class that sucks, and he just happens to be the front runner. But I think having him as wide receiver 1 is going to be a mistake with whichever team takes him. Again, I don't think he's not a talented player. I just don't think he's that we've said it ad nauseum. That we don't exactly think his profile is befitting of a first round wide receiver. It just doesn't feel like that. He feels like a second round talent to me. And for fantasy, doesn't really tilt the scales enough. So yeah, God bless Dallas. But I think Dallas, we talk about Genty, Warren, or one of the wide receivers, whomever it would be, except for a slot guy. I wouldn't think Burden or Ibuka just because Lamb is out of the slot. So, I mean, one of the outside guys. So that's really Golden or Tet. So
Yep.
Golden, Tet, Warren or Genty or even Amari and Hampton are all, I think, in play here, because they need themselves an offensive weapon. So I think they might swing weapon there, and whatever weapon they like best, I think that's what they're going to do. Doesn't it feel like a total Dallas pick?
Oh, 100% feels like a
Yeah.
Dallas pick to go there. Like, Omari and Hampton, if he goes to Dallas at 12 and Genty goes to the Raiders at 6,
Yeah.
which running back do you want more in Dynasty?
It's super close now, isn't it?
Really fucking close, isn't it? It really
Mm-hmm.
is. Like, would you feel okay pressing the button if the name at 101 is Omari and Hampton as opposed to Ashton Genty? I think it was a question that you kind of have to ask yourself because the situations are similar. Although, like, the situation for Dallas running backs last year wasn't necessarily the best. They were not up there as far as targets to the running back. Obviously, there's going to be some changes coming and whatnot, but yeah, I don't know, man. It
That's
would.
why I'm okay. I mean, trading out of the 101 to the 102, 103 is fine for me. I mean, in a single quarterback league, probably just trading to the 102. But if you need a quarterback too, like I'm in a rebuilding team and I've got the 101. I'm like, I don't want this pick. Like, I mean, sure, Genty would be fine, but I'm a couple years away from competing in that league. I need some long term stuff, and I'd love to sell in the hotness of Genty. No real takers yet in that league, so is what it is. I've also got a 101 on a team that I'm like the most dominant team in the league by far. Like I'm fucking that good in that league, and I'm like, just want to take Genty just to be like my one share and just like dunking everybody. But my true feelings as 101 holder is that I don't think it's as valuable as the market says it is. But I don't think the market is actually reacting with I don't see a lot of trades for the 101 in my leagues. Right? I
No,
mean, so
I
I
have
don't.
one, and this is interesting, Jax. I have a 101, and I've entertained trading it, but I feel like the way that this draft class is, like we've talked about it, you got those top 5 running backs.
Yeah,
And then especially like, like you can have a quarterback, that's fine. But the hard part that I've found is that depending on how far I move back, I don't feel like I'm going to be getting a rookie that I still really love if I'm in that like 10 or 11 that is
sure.
worth me trading the 101 for whatever that pick is plus, right? The plus just doesn't really feel worth it for me to tear down that far. And then
I think if you tear
oftentimes,
down that far, Trav, you need to get a future first. Like if
well,
you're anywhere
exactly.
10 or further, you have to get like 10 plus another first.
And I think what I actually want to do is only move back a few spots, but then those
Sure.
guys don't necessarily want to pay up as much because the optics are only a couple of spots. So it is
Bingo.
tricky to trade out of there right now. And then conversely, I would say probably for those other people, it's probably tricky to trade in there with my ass wanting to make sure that I get good enough value for that pick.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, jumping off of that Cowboys talk, Jax, let's talk about how many wide receivers we think go in this first round here. Because we talked about Tet McMillan, we talked about Matthew Golden, we talked about Emeka Igbuka, and then I think Luther Burden could be a guy that sneaks into that first round. I saw somebody on one of your Twitter posts that I commented on today saying that they are locking Trey Harris in as a
Hmm.
round 1 wide receiver, which I think that the both of us like. What are we thinking here as we look at this first round? Because like, okay, wide receiver landing spots. Raiders, maybe. Panthers, maybe. Saints, maybe. Cowboys. Falcons would be an interesting spot, I think, Jax, to pair with Drake London and Michael Penix's new tenure. Cardinals could pair somebody. I don't think they're going to do it in the first round after Marv last year. Bengals are no longer a wide receiver landing spot at 17 after T. Higgins. Yeah, then keep going down the list. Broncos, Steelers got DK. Chargers look interesting. Don't know if they would go that high of capital after Ladd and what he did. Man, Ravens are
Well,
always in there.
we
Commanders.
talk. I sent the tweet just because sometimes we ask these questions. What's typical and typical for an NFL draft? I looked at 2016 through 2024, so 9 total drafts. In those drafts, wide receivers 4.3 wide receivers taken in round 1, 5.1 taken in round 2, 4.3 taken in round 3. So about 4 or 5 taken in the first 3 rounds, average of about 13.8 in day 1 and day 2. So what that tells me is that that's an average class, right? A good class you'll see more, a subpar class you'll see less. So, obviously, but we've seen 2 and 3 wide receivers taken in round 1. Lately that's been a little bit more. Like 24 was 7, 23 was 3, 22 was 6, 21 was 5, 2020 was 6. So we've seen that number going up. Passing game more oriented. I think we're going to see, I think probably 4 would be my guess. I think Golden is going, it feels like, in the first
Yeah.
round, which I think is a mistake, but regardless, the buzz is there. I just don't think he's not going to go. Tet, I think, will. And I do think Ibuka slides into the first round at some point, probably late. He is a slot player. As much as we like him, slot players tend to fall a little bit in the draft. And then just give me one more guy, I think, whether it's Burden or whomever, but it could be 3. It could be even 2, quite frankly. But they might get a little excited. I think there's some depth elsewhere, meaning like defensive tackle and stuff like that. It could be interesting that, some of those premium positions, offensive line, defensive line, push some guys back. But I know NFL GMs can't help themselves with taking wide receivers. We see it every year, the Xavier Legette's and the Keon Coleman's and all these players that get pushed up where they really shouldn't be being drafted there, but they are drafted there. All that being said, I think that's probably it. And I do think the second round is actually a fertile spot for these wide receivers. I think you might see 2 to 4 in the first round, but then maybe close to, who knows, 5 to 10, somewhere in that number in the second round with all these, the Jaden Higgins, the Alec Ayamanor, Trey Harris, all these guys. I think there's going to be a kind of a run on wide receivers in round 2. I think it's going to be running backs and wide receivers, taken through the day 2. Day 2 is going to be a fun day.
Oh, dude, it's going to be so much fun. We look at the top of that second round. Browns at 33, Titans at 35, Raiders 37, your Patriots at 38. Now that they got
Yes.
Diggs, 38 is definitely more viable. Think of a guy like a Jaden Higgins going there.
Be
Maybe
great.
even a Jalen Noel going
Yep.
to the Patriots at 38 would be phenomenal. Saints at 40, Jets 42, Cowboys 44. So there's a ton of great spots. I think we got more
Yeah.
spots than we got talent, though. So somebody's
Yeah.
going to be either left holding a bag and drafting another position or overdrafting some of these guys that we have kind of outside of our top 10. Because if I look at my rankings here, Jax, I have maybe 6, maybe 7 wide receivers that would probably be able to, that I think would be viable to go in the first 2 rounds of the draft. And that's not including one Matthew Golden, although we could push it back to Matthew Golden, Alec Ayamanor, and we get 9. So I think it's going to be a very interesting watch to see who comes in there and who gets these spots, because I think there's some of these spots that are much better than others. And I think this is where we like some guys like Higgins and Noel and Royals and stuff like that. And I don't want to see them get tanked by the Saints or the Jets or something like that.
I think there's also, you got to remember, there's players that we are not that high on, like Isaiah Bond and Savion Williams, that consistently get pushed up the draft boards by the NFL intelligentsia. We just checked PFF's Dynasty rankings. They had both those players way, way higher than we had them. They had them higher in the aggregate than we did at the position. So, I mean, they're definitely higher on these guys. Savion Williams is said to, be a potential second round pick. Who just said that? I was Todd McShay was talking about what he had heard. Cody Carpentier mentioned on my pod, and he was like Savion Williams going in day 2, which is interesting. It's a tools,
Yeah.
right? They're drafting the tools. So the guys we like, but you look even Jack Besh, Xavier
Restrepo.
Restrepo. I don't think so, but like the NFL could get excited about him for some reason. But
He's got the
Isaiah
dog
Bond,
factor. He's got
Savion
the
Williams,
dog factor.
yeah,
Yeah.
heart lunch pail guy. But I think there's enough guys right there that that's what I really think there's going to be a run on those guys. The other guy that I've been quietly liking, and Cody and I talked about him on the pod, is Torrey Horton. I think
Yeah.
he's a 3rd round pick in this draft as well. I really like Torrey Horton. He's in my top 12 wide receivers in this class as well.
Very nice. I'm gonna have to dig a little bit deeper. I have him a little bit lower than you do. I like guys, and I don't know if they're gonna go this high, but I like Ty Felton a lot. He had a
Yeah.
pretty good combine there. I have been rising a little bit on Jack Besh, just seeing him getting a little bit of, top 60 draft capital in certain mock drafts and things. Lower down the list, I like a little bit more guys, but they're definitely not going to go in round two. But I think there's going to be some of those hot spots. There always is for running back and for wide receiver in round two, where you get guys like DK Metcalf was the second round wide receiver in the 50s, I believe. And then we always have these guys in that kind of 32 to 40 range that break out. Some of the guys that bust as well. That's where we saw Keon Coleman last year, remember? And Leggett went at 30, 31, I believe, with the Panthers trading in from Buffalo, I believe. So, um, yeah, it was an interesting draft, and there's going to be those hits and misses. So make sure that you're listening to our show, because we're going to tell you those guys that you should be taking and the guys that you should be avoiding here on the Dynasty Underground. And I know Joe can't wait. I'm sure Joe's listening to the show. He's probably just aching to get in here and converse. He's
Yes.
probably got his pinky up as he drives home from his retreat. Just cursing us out as politely as possibly can be
Yeah.
with a collar on. Love you,
Yep.
Joe, and love you all of our listeners. The reception's been really good. We got a lot of people, we're talking.
Hell yeah.
It's cool to like have a community of people where you're talking about things about your show, and like they're citing lines from your show. One of our supporters jumped in the Discord today, and first thing he says is his name's Dart Bro, and so I love
Yeah.
seeing that. So all these people
Yeah.
that are riding with us, we really, really appreciate you.
Hell yeah.
Talked about it a bit there, Jax, that there's always these pockets of the second round where we get running backs. And I think
Yes.
we're going to have a dearth of those as we talk about. Okay, let's talk about the first round for running backs, though, because we talked about Genty and Omari and Hampton. And I think those guys are fairly locked into the first round, would you say? Maybe less so Omari and Hampton, but it's seeming more so as the days go by. If you had to pick one, there's only going to be three running backs that go in the first round, Jax. Omari and Hampton and Ashton Genty are two of them. Who is the third?
Travion. I think Travion, if someone does see him as this sort of multifaceted weapon, they could certainly jump. I think Judkins has a chance too, because
That's my pick.
he did such a great job at the combine. A Pittsburgh type of team. You know what I mean? Just you could just
Mm-hmm.
see Pittsburgh being like Judkins, lunch pail guy, whatever. That being said, though, the data on the running backs is far different. Only
Oh yeah, tell me.
6.5 players taken on average in days 1 and 2, which is the first 3 rounds. That
Mm-hmm.
goes back till 2016. You are likely to not get more than 6 or 7 running backs taken in the first 3 rounds. That's crazy. Average 1.3 running backs taken in first round, 2.1 in the second, and 3 in the third. That's the average. Crazy. Now, I think
Mm-hmm.
this is a good running back class. We could see as many as maybe 10 running backs taken on days 1 and 2, where a lot of guys slide into that third round. That could be the round where everybody's kind of
Yeah.
popping off the board, right? In which order, where they land, all the rest of it is going to be very, very interesting. That's why I think day 2 is going to be very exciting, because which of those running backs actually, vault themselves into that day 2 capital, which not only is like, oh, it's good because the NFL likes them more than the players that are drafted in round 4, but it matters. The contract is different. They're tethered to more sort of organizational commitment. So
Mm-hmm.
when like a guy like Tyrone Tracy could get replaced, but if he were drafted in the late second, he's less likely. It's just they're like, no, man, that's our guy. We spent a second round pick on him. So these types of things tether them into longer term opportunity. So whomever those guys are, we're gonna be paying attention to that. I'm just praying it's RJ Harvey.
I know you are. I know you are. Him and that donk gonna get you some draft capital. Absolutely, Jack. So like, how do we want to like skin this cat here? Do we want to just talk about some teams and what we think about
Yes.
them, or do we want to talk about okay? So let's talk about the Houston Texans, because I think they are a juicy landing spot for running backs. Probably when we look at the draft, of course, they are picking in the first round at 25, and the second round their next pick is at 58. So 25 could actually be a spot for them.
It's possible for Omarion, yeah, and I
Which
think
if we yeah, Omari
I think
in
they're
Houston. Whew.
yeah. Oh, dude, anybody in Houston is a good spot, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because you're attached to Nico and Stroud, like you're riding, and so I mean, that's a great spot, and really, Mixon's there, but for how long? Like,
Who
I mean,
cares?
exactly, I mean, even if you kind of get put in the corner for 2025, I think there's going to be, especially if it's first round capital, the writing's on the wall that it's going to be sooner rather than later, which is why I think it might be later
Yeah.
that they pick a running back, just because I think they feel like we'd rather have someone come in subservient to Joe Mixon in year one and then take him over in year two. But that can change. That could be totally bullshit. They could just love Omari and be like, fuck it, we're
Hmm.
drafting him because we love him. So a lot of
Hmm.
different ways to look at it. But I do think that they're going to take a back, and I do think that they're going to take a back before round 5. In other words, a top, 10 to 15 back in this class, one of the premium guys that we all like. And so I think that'll be a good landing spot. And I don't think it really, only maybe that first round pick does it really shatter Joe Mixon's 2025 outlook. I mean, I think either way, he's going to get a pretty good chunk of 50-50.
Well, and I think there might come a point where Joe Mixon's health shatters his own outlook too, right?
Exactly.
Because even one
Yep.
of these guys in the third and fourth round, we have to remember when we're drafting here that kind of like what you alluded to, the third round for a running back is the new second round. The
Yeah.
fourth round is the new third round. It's like higher
Yep.
capital than you would consider for like a wide receiver. So these guys are going to be viable. You said a guy
Yes.
before the fifth round, which basically means that's a guy we're going to need to take note of for these 4-round rookie drafts that we're in. So whoever it is, we're going to want that guy. And I think no matter what, he is going to get a chance to show us what he's got in 2025 at some point, because Joe Mixon will get a little bit banged up. He doesn't have a whole ton of tread left on the tires. He has been putting
Yeah.
in workhorse volume for years now. So I think whoever it
Exactly.
is, like if we look at that 58th pick, like look at a guy, think about Cam Scatabo in there.
Yeah. Or Caleb Johnson's a really good,
Yeah. I don't
fit
know
in
if he
that offense.
goes, I don't know if he lasts all the way to 58 though, right? Because if we see 3 in the first round, then the only 2 left that are really viable for that mid to top second round are Travion and Caleb.
Yeah.
Or Quinshawn and Caleb, right? And so I think those 2 guys are going to be hot commodities in that top half to that second round, where we could see teams clamoring for a trade up situation there, just with there's a big teardrop there, right? And I think it's going to be fun to see how that's affected by the real NFL draft, or it's even there in
Totally.
the NFL draft, right? Is that tier existent in the NFL draft?
We're not sure, right? We're really
Nope.
not, because who was it? One of the NFL.com guys, Jeremiah or whatever, had like Dylan Sampson as their RB3. You
Yeah.
know, like who
Not
knows?
even
Draft,
Joe's got that. Not even Joe's got Dylan Sampson up there.
but do you know what I mean? So the draft boards could be fucking wonky from these teams for sure, because they're run by people like Joe Shane. So you know, you know what I mean? You
I will
understand?
never get tired of you mentioning his name in the context that you mentioned him on this
Yes.
show. If anybody watching on YouTube just looks at my hat, they'll know why. If you're
Yeah.
an audio listener, I'm an Eagles fan. So, yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's, what are we looking at here? Scatabo. Where do you think Ollie Gordon, like how high do you think he rises? Because he's kind of sitting, doesn't really have too much stink on him now after a solid combine. Doesn't have too much shine on him either. Does he sneak into the back of that second there? Probably not. Maybe a
No,
late
I think he's.
third round
I think
pick.
he's. Yeah, he's a third round pick that could go in the fourth. I think. I don't think he's
Yeah.
a third round pick that could go in the second. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think maybe I just have him pushed up from a fantasy context versus what we're talking about here is kind of the real NFL draft. But late round 3, early, and it gets deep because of all those comp picks, right? There's tons
The,
of
the way I'm
teams
the way I'm
where,
looking at it is like normally there's 6 players taken in day one and day two. I think that's definitely going to be exceeded in this
oh
class.
yeah,
But
yeah,
by how much, I don't know. And I'm looking at like in rounds 1 and 2, I'm thinking there's going to be 6, to be square with you. Like rounds
yeah,
1 and 2, there'll be 6. I just wonder how many of the rest fit into round 3. Is That's just what I think. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll see. I just think you're going to see, like, even if it's just Genty in round 1, I think you'll see 4 or 5 go in round 2. You
yeah,
know what I mean? So I just
for
sort of
sure.
see. 6 in the first 2 rounds somehow or some way, and it could be guys that we don't think. Like
Hmm. I
what
was
was our
gonna ask.
Texas boy? What was our Texas boy's name? The
Oh, Jaden Blue. Jaden
no,
Blue.
but yeah, what was the guy who put him there?
Chad from Texas. Yeah,
Chad
Chad from
from
Texas.
Texas, of course.
Yeah.
It could be a guy like Jaden Blue if Chad from Texas has his way.
Yeah.
Um, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
he forced me to know who Jaden Blue was because he had Jaden
Right,
Blue going at pick 32 for crying
right,
out loud.
right,
But yeah,
exactly. So
and like
shit like
so
that could happen in the
would your
real
sixth
life. You
guy
know?
be Devin Neal? Like you think Devin Neal would be the six?
Oh, for the NFL,
Yeah.
I don't think so. Actually,
No.
I think it's
It's
probably
probably
more
something
likely.
weird.
Like a Dylan Sampson, I think has been getting a lot of NFL hype. I think it's more
Crazy.
likely it's a guy like him.
Yeah, or even a Bashal Tutin after that 40. Somebody just
Absolutely,
goes off the wall and decides to take him there. Scatabo could be
absolutely.
it too, though, right? Scatabo has some of that juice coming off of that big season and just the crazy shine that he got. So
I think you're right. I think the 4-3-2. There's going to be a GM who's going to draft the trait and say, you know what, he's good. Coach him. Figure it out. He runs a 4-3-2. If you can't make him good, that's on you, not on me. I draft talent.
really,
There's talent right there. Make it happen. That's how GMs draft, right? You're a coach. Coach his ass. I drafted him. He's
mhm.
4-3-2. I picked the right guy. Now you fix him.
Yeah,
So right, it's true.
I
They're
think
not like yeah.
I think Tootin, Giddens, and Harvey, none of those three are getting out of the third round for
I
sure.
love that. Yeah,
I
I
think
love
they're
that.
all going in the third round because I think after those top six guys, it's as much as we know that it is deep and we think that it's deep for fantasy. I think from NFL perspective and kind of top level talent, it gets a little bit murkier, right? And so there's a big
Yeah.
teardrop in there with those guys.
And I
That
think those guys definitely have their sort of spot too. Like, each of them have their own traits. Like Ollie Gordon and RJ Harvey are very different players, obviously.
Mhm.
So that's also what we're going to see is we're going to see guys drafted with purpose. Wherever Brashard Smith goes, they weren't between Brashard Smith and Ollie Gordon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. Was not deciding between those two guys. Is Brashard Smith or like Xavier Restrepo or something?
Yeah. Right. Right. Actually, Rashard Smith likely better than Strepo.
Yeah.
But the other guy I really like is Jarquez Hunter.
Mhm.
So he could see his way into the third round as well. What about teams like and players like Tyrone Tracy? Um, you know,
He is so far coming out of this offseason fairly clean. Like
and that's kind
he's
of a
looking
problem.
fairly clean so far.
That's kind of the problem because I mean, if you bring in,
Mhm.
someone to sort of shield him from that. If you bring in, I don't know
Yeah,
who, it
there's
doesn't
no one
matter,
to
but
block him from draft capital killing
they're going
him.
to draft somebody. They need somebody in the room, right? They need probably two guys. They're probably going to draft two running backs at some point during their draft. And it's deep enough that, they could take a guy in rounds 4, 5, 6 that could be just as good as Tyrone Tracy, who just outplays him and gets on the field. It's certainly possible. I like Tyrone Tracy a lot, but I mean, he's in danger. Who else is in danger? I mean,
Well, if you look at
G-
Tracy, think about
yeah,
Tracy. His best, like if they draft a running back, his best case scenario is it's like Damian Martinez, so that he at least still has some of that pass catching role. If it's
yes,
anybody above him in like say my rankings here, I've got like Giddens, Harvey, I have Ollie Gordon up there, Scatabo. I think that all those guys can give you a little bit of 3 down skill set to
yep.
where Tyrone Tracy just gets obsolete because that guy can also be an amazing runner, which Tyrone Tracy was an amazing runner too,
He,
but
he was so good. Don't take
yeah,
this the wrong way, anybody listening
exactly.
thinking that we don't like Tyrone Tracy, the player. It's the same thing that we've said before. It was like the old James Robinson thing. When James Robinson was good for Jacksonville, everybody told me, dude, they're not going to draft a running back. James Robinson was awesome. He was nearly a Pro Bowler. He led the league and da 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 da. 95% of the carries went through James Robinson. What did Jacksonville do the next year? They drafted Travis Etienne with their very,
Yeah.
very first pick after Trevor Lawrence at pick 21 in the first round. So I didn't think that was a good plan, but that
No.
doesn't mean that these teams won't do it. And with a deep running back class or a quote unquote good running back class, these teams are going to be, thinking about that running back position, saying, "Ooh, which one should I take? Oh, my guy's there. Let me take him." And it's going to be J.R. Giddens or Devin
Hmm.
Neal or Ollie Gordon or one of these guys with a big name, and they're going to come in and they're going to be like, "That's the guy." And Tyrone Tracy's going to be relegated. It's very, very possible. And other guys that could at least maybe go from even like a Chase Brown, who could go from getting every snap to having more of a split backfield,
I don't think
which
it's
is
happening.
very likely.
I don't think it's happening. I think with what they've invested in that offense now with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase locked up, I think
Yeah.
they need Chase Brown and his nothing contract to be a thing that is an every down back for them so that they can spend all of their draft and financial resources going forward on that defense. So I think to me,
And the offensive line.
Chase, yeah, and the offensive line, exactly, which only helps Chase Brown, right? So to
Yep.
me, Chase Brown is a bit of a buy. Um, and yeah, I just think he did it last year. The Bengals were humming with him. He was not the problem in that
Dude, I
offense.
love
In
him.
fact, he made that running back room a lot more stable after the Zach Moss injury. And so I think he earned it. I think, we look at what Joe Burrow did to get T. Higgins his contract. I think if Joe Burrow wasn't so vocal, T. Higgins is probably like a New England Patriot or something right now, Jax. So
Mm.
what if Joe Burrow likes having Chase Brown there? What if Joe Burrow can see the validity of not spending resources on other running backs in the draft? I don't know. This is all just like grasping at some straws here, but I think Chase Brown is locked in as that running back one for Cincinnati, and I would be buying right now.
Fair enough.
It's
I mean,
interesting. We can agree to disagree. I'm ready to be wrong on that too. Like it's hard because you didn't
but
invest that kind of
if
value in him.
if you look at like Chuba Hubbard versus Chase Brown, right? Chuba at least got Rico Dowdle there to sort of like be like, hey, this is our backup running back. Maybe they'll bypass the running back position. Cincinnati only went back to the Samaje Perine well, which I think that well may have runneth dry, and they are going to look for some sort of running back depth. Running back depth in this particular draft is pretty fucking good depth. And that's where
Yeah.
I'm coming from. I'm not saying that they're going to draft a running back with like purpose of replacement, but if all of a sudden they end up with Damian Martinez in the 5th round, it's like, well, he might earn some carries, bro. He's a pretty fucking good
Couple
runner.
carries. I'd be stoked about that though, because he's not going to be getting any of the pass catching work. You know what I
You know
mean?
what
And
I'm
like,
saying though.
I know
It's
what
just
you're saying. I see it more as a Corum Kyron situation as
mm,
opposed to what I'm looking at as far as like a Benson and a James Conner situation, where I think Benson's going to be able to give us a little standalone this season. Whereas I
interesting.
don't think Corum's going to be that unless Kyron gets an injury. So I think Chase Brown's kind of locked it down that to that level, right? And so it's just all a matter of how much you think
It's a
Chase
good take.
Brown has really won the job. You know what I mean?
That's a good take. I like that take. What about if the Cardinals draft a running back?
I don't think they're going to. I've been seeing that. I think that would be wild. I think that just means that they absolutely believe Trey Benson's going to be nothing. And I don't think they're ready to admit that just yet. Not only
Hmm.
admit that, but I don't think he is that. You know what I mean? So I think Trey Benson's one of my biggest buys at running back. And I'm ready to be wrong on that too, because he's cheap enough where if he's nothing, fine, you move on. The upside is so fantastic that I'm absolutely going to be buying him. And I don't know why people are putting them out there as a landing spot. I don't think he did anything bad last year. I think James Conner was just so fucking good last year that
Right.
Trey Benson didn't get on the field.
What about the Chiefs? The Chiefs are constantly, mocked having some sort of running back. Sometimes it's Travion Henderson late first, sometimes it's a little bit later, but one way or the other, people are talking about that being a good landing spot. Of course, it's always a good landing spot for
It's a
whomever the
landing
running back.
spot.
Well, no. I'm saying whomever the running back is for that team, that's a good landing spot because Patrick Mahomes running backs score a lot of rushing touchdowns. Period.
Yeah.
Look, that just happens. So, whomever they get is liable to score some fucking touchdowns, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah,
Um,
it feels inconsistent sometimes though. Like Isaiah Pacheco just started getting consistent, but previous to that, it was like it was a little bit tougher to rely on, and you kind of know the guy's not getting a whole lot of targets. So I'm a little bit off the Chiefs running back, especially because the way they've invested in it. I mean, they tried going the high end with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, But since then, it's all like piecemeal guys, and then Isaiah Pacheco just kind of worked out for them, right? So it's just kind of the way they invest in the position that makes me not necessarily like it, and then the usage that guy gets when he's in there, which for touchdown scoring purposes is great. But I want the targets and the 3-down skill set, and I don't necessarily see them using the running backs for that anymore, despite Andy Reid's long history of doing so.
I guess, but I mean, Kareem Hunt had 7 touchdowns and 32 targets and 8 starts, right? I mean, Kareem Hunt. We're
Yep.
talking about Kareem Hunt. And if I look down, 7, 8. This was their worst year, and they had 10. It looks like 10 running back touchdowns, which is it's been like their worst. They've had a lot better, running backs, and that actually didn't account for receiving touchdowns too at the running back position. I think actually it might have been a little bit better, but nonetheless, you get my drift. I went back. I once looked at it because I was like, let me go back a year. Pacheco had 9. Hilaire had 2. McKinnon had 5. That was the year before. You're talking about whatever that number just was, 9, 2, and 5. 11, 17, whatever, right? So they had 17 touchdowns as a group the year before. Every year you go back. Now, I know that's an amalgam of 3 players. I get that. I'm just saying the Kansas City running back. I'm not saying that it's going to be Pacheco or
Yeah.
whomever. I'm just saying there is fantasy points there for whomever is toting the rock. He likes to throw it to a running back in the red zone. McKinnon had 4 receiving touchdowns that year.
Mm-hmm.
They get them. They get receiving touchdowns out of the backfield. P. Ryan, whatever. All these guys. I mean, right? It's like they haven't had a lead back except for Pacheco, who was a 6th round draft pick. It's not like he's some sort of stud. So I think there's room. If someone lands there, I'm telling you, man, this is going to be a prime landing spot for someone who's dope. What if they do get Travion?
If they go that high
Get
on
you
it, I'm
fucking
down.
excited. Yeah,
If
yeah.
they go that high and that guy gets 75% of that pie that you were just laying out there, I want that guy for sure. If that guy's getting 40% of that pie and then 2 other
Sure.
guys are getting 30% of that pie, which is kind of what we've been seeing. Like we've
Yeah.
been seeing that with the targets, we've been seeing that with the carries, aside from some of that, mini bell cow pockets from Isaiah Pacheco. It's just really hard to rely on that with the expectations that we expect of him. Everybody talks about it as you're getting a surefire running back 1. We haven't really
Weekly.
had that since the glory
Weekly.
days of, yeah,
I
which
don't
one's
know,
it
man,
going to
because
be
even
though?
Kareem Hunt was a borderline running back 1 on a weekly basis. Not on
Were
I
you
wouldn't say
stoked about starting Kareem Hunt
yes.
though?
Yes, this
I
last
had
year,
him
yes.
and barely. You
No,
started him
I had
because you
him
had to, Jax.
I had him in my lineup. No way, bro. Go back and look at it. Kareem Hunt
Kareem
had.
Hunt late season with the Chiefs, yeah, because you had
That's what I'm
to, and
saying.
because they had to. They had nobody else.
That's the point. That's what I'm getting at. The
Yeah, but if
Chiefs
they have
running back.
3 different guys, they're spreading that out. So if they
They
have
don't though.
3 guys at health,
They
if
have
they have
not.
Kareem Hunt, Isaiah Pacheco, and some rookie, they're going to be spreading the pie between 3 of those guys, and I don't want
Mm,
any of that. And that's what they do when they have healthy guys. When you
They
saw
haven't.
when you
Pacheco
saw
was dominant when he was in there
yeah, because who the fuck else was there? But when they had Clyde and Jerick McKinnon and some other schmuck in there, they were splitting up that running back pie between all
because
3
they
of them.
didn't have anybody.
They had different roles, but that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
They
Like
didn't have
I don't know.
anybody.
Like it depends how high they invest. If they invest at like a Travion level, I'm down and use them at that level. Great. But if they invest in a
Mm.
guy and give them 40% of their running back work, I don't want that. I'm going to look up some of these running back stats because I did a couple
On
years
a
ago and it
weekly
wasn't
basis.
as good on a weekly basis. But tell
Yes,
me
week
who
to
that
week.
guy is. Tell me who that
It
guy
depends
is.
on it depends on the week. For what I'm saying is every single week that I had Kareem Hunt, he was in my fucking lineup. I did not think twice. It wasn't like, oh my God, they're going to split up his work. Kareem Hunt was a weekly starter down the stretch last year in
I'll
a
look at
lot
that.
of leagues. Please do, because he was dope. And he scored touchdowns and he was great. And then, Pacheco the year before, obviously before he got hurt, was scoring touchdowns and dominating. Now, Yeah, McKinnon was also getting his, and the year before that, McKinnon was kind of getting he was a weekly winner. I mean, he basically won your league in 2023 late season. I believe it was 23, if I'm memory serving me right. He was like RB1 2 out of 3 weeks late in the season. The Chiefs running back is a player that you can start on a weekly basis with confidence. Now, if that person changes, yeah, I understand that it may be Pacheco, it may be McKinnon, it may be Hunt. But if I say those 3 names, those are bums. If they get someone who's at all good, who's got a 3-down skill set, give me fucking RJ Harvey in that lineup. Bro, I just went from 6 to midnight.
No, and if we know that they're going to invest that high, and it's going to be
But
one of
that's a
those
third
guys
round
that we
pick.
like,
That could be a fourth
but
round
Jax,
pick.
there's only like 7 or 8 guys that we feel that way about, though, right? So they could really easily miss that boat. And if we look at Kareem Hunt down the stretch, he had a 4-week pocket from week 7 through 10, where he was probably scoring about 17 points per game. Weeks 11 through 17. 6.0 PPR, 11.7, 3.5, 3.9, 5.9, 15.9, 8.0. So it was just tricky to rely on, right? And I'm not trying to like be a danker here or anything here, but I have not been loving the KC backfield, and it has done me good to not invest there, basically, is how I feel. And maybe that's like, I'm going to look more into it for sure and see what the targets look like and see what the carry volume in the red zone look like, because I don't have that on hand. So I do want to check that out. But I remember I was looking at it shortly after the Clyde Edwards-Helaire pick, and the Chiefs don't use their running backs like we talk about Andy Reid uses his running backs anymore.
Look, in the weeks that I'm going to push back because I'm not letting you get away with that. This is Kareem Hunt in last season was the starting running backs from week 5 to week 12. Those were the weeks he was a starter. Before that, he was a bench player. Didn't even play in weeks 1 and 2 or week 3. He finally played a little bit in week 4. Week 5 is when he started. And then Pacheco came back late in the season, and I think even Kareem got dinged up too. But in those games, he went, 20 points, 23 points, 14 points, 21, 16, 7, and 12. That's the run he was on when he was the starter. And you know what? When he wasn't the starter, I didn't have him in the lineup. Why am I going to play a backup running back? I'm not playing a backup, but when, and I say starter, he never saw more than 69% of the offensive snaps. In those starts, it was between 55 and 69. So he just got the majority. When you knew he was going to be the guy, he was worth in the lineup. And when he's not, of course not. I'm not going to play a 20% player. Snap share tells everything. But if he's in the lineup or whomever, and again, whomever is going to get the 60% share of that Chiefs backfield, whoever's getting the goal line, because they're going to get near the goal line, and Mahomes ain't stealing that. And they don't have a dominant outside guy that they throw up these jump balls. They're going to run the ball. It's what they do. They get rushing touchdowns. And look, if this guy is that's the corpse of Kareem Hunt we're talking about. Like, you're saying these backs, you're talking about Isaiah Pacheco, who, by the way, was steamed up to a top 20, dynasty running back until he got hurt. Everybody had him way up there. Like,
I was way
why?
too high.
Me too, but everybody did. Why? Because he was performing at an incredibly high level when he's the starter for the Kansas City Chiefs. Fucking Jerick McKinnon was scoring when he was getting a healthy snap share for the Kansas City Chiefs. That's what I'm getting at. Now, you fast forward next season, whomever they draft doesn't have to be that good because he only has to clear the bar of a foot injury to Isaiah Pacheco. I think Pacheco healthy is one thing, but I talked to Adam Hutchinson about this injury because I was going to make a big trade in Dynasty for Pacheco, and I just texted him. I was like, bro, what's this foot thing? He goes, it's not good. He goes, those are very, very hard to come back from. He said, these are not like simple ones, especially for a running back. This is a tough injury for a running back. And kind of played out. I mean, I'm not sure. He might be fine next year and he might be dominant. That's in the cards. I'll give you that. But it's also possible that it just never works out again for Isaiah Pacheco, whom they're going to have to sign after next year or whatever. It's just, it gets
Mhm.
murky. And then Kareem Hunt's old and they don't have anybody else. And so even if it's late, that's what I'm saying. Like, even if it's a late guy, like go to RB 14, 15, Jarquez Hunter, go where you want to go. These guys might have a chance of having the most pop in the room and earning the trust of that offense and being in the lineup.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's fair enough because if you draft that guy, there will be some pockets where he gives you some of that production. I think you just have to accept some pockets if it's not one of those top guys where he's not giving you that because he's 1/3 of a backfield getting a very specific role is kind of my stance. And so I think like we're talking about the same thing
But
because
that
if I
guy
know
sucks on every team. The 1/3 guy who gets
100%, but I think the way the Chiefs use their running backs is if they have 3 guys that are all healthy, those guys are all gonna have certain roles, and they're gonna be used in certain roles. Like, I don't think bell cow Chiefs running back necessarily is something that has been something that we've seen if there's no injury. So I think, like, same deal. Like, I want the Chiefs starting running back if I know there's gonna be a Chiefs starting running back, but I think to have that guy, there needs to be an injury. Starting
we'll
running
see.
back, meaning getting like the lion's share. This is going to be good because this is a healthy
We'll see.
for us, Jack and Jackson. This is why we have a podcast together because we can track this shit. And we'll be
We'll
talking a
see.
year from now when I'm bashing you for taking that late guy and that late guy only getting like 20% carry share.
We'll see. We'll see. We'll
Could be
see.
a 3 or 4 year take potentially being that we do play in dynasty leagues. Let's move on from this conversation, Jax, because as much as I like to debate with you, my friend, we might still have some more debate, so I might not be out of the woods. Let's talk about the Chargers situation here. We've seen them be a draft landing spot with I think they're at the 22nd pick in the first round. They also did just sign Najee for big cash money. So even if they don't go at the 22nd pick, let's look at the second round they pick at 55. If they take a running back even at 55, like, what are you thinking for 2025? You still loving that guy for the long term? What's your stance on this Chargers kind of situation overall for a running back?
I think the Najee Harris signing definitely says something. I think, wasn't it? Yeah, it was Harbaugh who recruited him when he was a high school player. He chose Alabama over Harbaugh. Harbaugh's still bitter about not getting Najee, goes out and recruits him, signs him to the 1-year deal, but apparently they paraded him around the you know the stadium or whatever, showed him the whole facility and everything. It was like they were bringing him in as, it's just amazing. So I think they really like Najee. I think he's going to be the lead back there, and he's going to get the lion's share of everything he can handle for the Chargers. And I think it makes it so that they don't have to take a running back. They've got Vidal, who we like as a player, but certainly isn't holding any seat hostage in that room. So even if they do draft someone, I think it's probably going to be depth. Again, depth in this situation. Maybe they go for a certain type of player, a Brashard Smith type. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to decide to do, but I think that they don't feel beholden to the fact that they have to draft a running back. I think there's a very, very low chance that they take one in the first 2 rounds. That's just me. I don't think
Yeah.
that that's where they're going to focus their attention after signing Najee. I could be wrong. Been wrong many times, but I just don't see it.
Well, and $9.5 million probably tells you that, right?
Yep.
Um, yeah, I think Harbaugh showed last year in pockets that he really wants to kind of ride a guy out as his bell cow guy, taking 20 plus carries per game. And Najee is the quintessential guy to do that. I actually really like Najee. I think he might be one of those guys who for 2025 and for best ball, maybe drafting ahead of ADP, just because I think he will be the goal line back there as long as he's healthy, and he will be the first and second down guy there. But I don't know like what the ultimate upside is as far as top X running back. But I know he's a guy that I might like as far as the
I've got a
top.
question for you.
Yes.
So, who's more likely to be eviscerated? And by eviscerated, I mean really challenged for touches in this draft or after this draft? Najee Harris or Jalen Warren? Meaning,
Ooh,
who do you prefer in Dynasty? Because if you say that Najee
geez.
is safer than Jalen Warren, if you say that, then you can't have Jalen Warren ahead of Najee in Dynasty because they're really only 1 year assets anyway.
Yeah.
What do you
I
think?
think I like Najee. I think
Right? When you ask it that way,
Najee's gonna have 1 year contract as starting running back at the very least, staying power for the next like 6 years. You know what I mean? Or a chance at a
right,
starting
right,
job
right,
for the
yeah,
next like 6 years at
right.
the least, or somebody signs him to a 3-year deal or something like that. Jalen Warren could just as easily be somebody's backup, maybe change of pace at best. You know what I mean? Not a
Possibly
lot of capital drafted in him. I think he has somewhat of a 3-down skill set in today's NFL, but I
for
don't know if
sure.
the NFL necessarily sees him like that. I think, we're talking about Pittsburgh maybe bringing other guys in. They brought in Kenneth Gainwell, who I already said isn't like a huge threat or anything like that. But them
I think if
bringing
you told
somebody in
me,
tells us all we need to know.
I think if you told me that they both saw a 72% opportunity share in 2025, I'd take Jalen Warren. I'd be like, fuck yeah,
Yeah.
Jalen Warren
Yeah.
for sure.
Totally. He'd
But
get
I'm
way
not.
more targets.
Do you know what I mean? Like I'm
Yeah.
just like, yes, Jalen Warren greater than Najee Harris
Mhm.
if I know he's going to get it. But if you're saying who do you think is going to see a bigger opportunity share in 2025, my chip
Najee.
goes down on Najee. Yeah.
Najee. Yeah.
So
Big
that's an
Najee.
interesting dichotomy there. I think Pittsburgh is. We just talked about him being a potential landing spot for Judkins in round one. They surprised us with Najee that for the first time they did that. They just might well do it again,
Yeah.
and they might see Jalen Warren as that sort of change of pace back, placeholder, good player. We love having you around. You're going to get touches. We really love you, but let me introduce you to Quinshawn Judkins.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be phenomenal. That would be phenomenal. I mean, for the Judkins shares, I'm not a big Warren shareholder, right? So I'm not super invested in him, although I see why some people have been. But
Sure.
I'm very trepidatious on the fact, just that fact. It's like almost like the Tyrone Tracy thing, right? It's going to take nothing for him to just be
Right.
gone. He's not a
Yep.
first round running back like Najee Harris is. We're going to go to Washington here. I think this is a very
That's another
interesting
one.
spot to talk about because that offense is looking tantalizing. They just drafted Debo, who I think could be a very nice fit. Whether he's washed or not is up for grabs. We got to talk about this running back room though, because I think, however you see this, if you see it kind of like I do, like I'm a big Brian Robinson fan, and if I think that they want Robinson to still be in a tandem, I still want Brian Robinson, and I think you can get him for a lot cheaper than he's going to return. But what's your stance on that? Do you think they're looking to replace him, like fully replace him, or has he done enough? Do you think?
I think even Eckler's got enough left in the tank to play the role he's going to play.
Is he still
You know, we
signed? I think he's a free agent, isn't he? But he
you
could
can
come
check.
back easy.
You can check while I'm talking. I
He's
thought he was still there, but I'm going to look now. Now you've got me wanting to
sorry,
look.
brother. Sorry,
But
brother. I can look while
that's
you
okay.
chat.
No, he's locked in at the RB2 on our lad, so that should mean he's rostered up.
Oh yeah,
Um,
he is rostered up for 4.96. My apologies, sir.
yeah. So I think when we look at those two guys, they sort of have their individual skill set, and neither one of them is being leaned on as the like you got to do it all, and otherwise we're screwed. They showed that they would pay the likes of Jeremy McNichols or whatever the case. I think that when we look at that backfield, I think it's wide open for them to do absolutely anything. And by that, I
Mm,
mean they could do nothing. They could draft a running back very early. They could draft a couple of running backs. They could do almost anything, and I would not be surprised. They could draft the heir apparent to Eckler and a Brashard Smith type. They could backfill the Brian Robinson type and get a Damian Martinez, and I wouldn't be surprised at any of it. Or they could just kind of pass and then maybe get a Taj Brooks or a Marcus Yarns in the fifth, sixth, seventh.
mm,
Anything is possible, and I think that they could play it any which way. I do think that neither Brian Robinson or Eckler are like super safe, though.
yeah,
They're pretty safe, I think, in terms of their roles, but not super safe if you know what I'm saying.
yeah. No, I would agree there. And yeah, for some reason I thought Eckler was a free agent potentially to be re-signed, but knowing that he's there now, yeah, I think it's probably a little bit less likely. Um, But yeah, anything could be said. Like they got a brand new quarterback and they're looking at the long term here, right? So they could be looking to bring a guy in who could do that. And that's a guy who I would probably be willing to wait on if he's going to have to contest with Robinson and Eckler. They are the level to which I would probably be willing to wait on, for the fact that that guy's going to be in a backfield with Jaden Daniels.
The other spot that I think we should talk about. Let's talk about Chicago actually, because
Yeah,
the
let's.
DeAndre Swift question is like, this dude's had like 200 fantasy points every year for 6 years straight or whatever it is. Like you go look at it, you're like, huh, that's
Yeah,
true. Like depending on your scoring, it's like 193. He's had a couple times, whatever. But like basically, he's had 200 fantasy points every year, and I'm like,
we don't
I
even
don't
talk about him.
really, yeah, I don't really think he's going to do that again. But yet he probably might, right? Like it's like predictive that he should. Now, of course, if they go get Ashton Genty, boy, that fucking crushes
Mm-hmm.
DeAndre Swift. If they miss on Ashton Genty, like the Cowboys missed on like Jonathan Brooks last year, and then they never drafted a running back in the entire
Yeah.
draft. They just like they cried and ran
Fine.
away. Fine, we can't have
I don't
our
even want
boy.
one anyway.
Exactly. Yes. They were like, we don't even want one. We didn't even need a running back. We got
Yeah.
Zeke.
Yeah.
So they could get a little petulant about the whole thing too and be like, fine, we love DeAndre Swift.
Yeah.
So like his range of outcomes are that's a gigantic range of outcomes. The lead back on a ascending offense with a dope play caller,
Dude.
with a year two quarterback, the whole thing is like a refurbished offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is like DeAndre Swift to the moon, or completely eviscerated, right? Like those are the range of outcomes for Swift.
They can get out on him too. Like, yeah, they got like 10 million in dead money, but next year they save 7.5 on the cap. So they could get out on him. And so I kind of think DeAndre Swift could be like a dirt cheap buy, but I don't know if this is necessarily
If they draft
the cheapest.
Genty, yeah.
Yeah, because like I don't know if this is the cheapest he'll be, so I don't know if now's the time to buy him. He'd be cheaper after Genty, because I think if Genty comes in there, the writing would be on the wall that he might not even be on that team this year. So he could be bought super cheap, go to another team and get that surge. So he's somebody that you could potentially do that as a guy who can step in and give you 200 fantasy points if he gets a full season. I like DeAndre Swift. I've always kind of liked him. He gives you that ultimate upside back. Like we wanted him to be what we now are seeing out of Jahmyr Gibbs, like Jahmyr Gibbs is what we wanted. What is our thing? So DeAndre Swift is the Jahmyr. We don't have a third guy though. We don't have a third.
Yeah. There needs to be another guy.
Damn it.
We need Kuveticus here to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. We need
that's
him.
what he's here for.
He's the classy and sophisticated one who can put all of that.
Really, we're just like a 3-legged table falling over. That's all we are without him. Yep.
That's what's happening. Yeah, it's a sad little story here without.
Sad little story. Speaking of which, maybe it's about time we said goodnight to the people. I mean, this has been a great show, but we'll say goodnight on the Joquavius Kuveticus, right? Is that how we say it?
We don't say the last name like that when we say regular Joe. We can only say the last name like that if we put a Joquavius before it.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
There's rules to this shit. It's aristocratic.
Yeah, Siri's the one that messed up the name. Yeah, Siri's the one that messed up the name, not me.
Yeah. Way to go, Siri.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think this is a good time to ride it out, Jax. That was a fun little show. Like we said, we were going to let our hair down and see where the conversation took us, and I think we did just that. We had some really good chatter, some nice little debate, and something to kind of track forward as we see that Chiefs running back room. So always love forming that stuff up. Going to be interesting chirping happening on that, Jax.
Yeah.
So I love it. And
I think the biggest I think the biggest takeaway for the listeners too is the thought process of getting through, what you're going to do with certain running backs, right?
Yeah.
Like what you're going to do with Pacheco and Swift and Chase Brown and Tony Pollard, or, just keep going down the list. And, what are the likelihood that an elite running back hits? Well, it's like an elite running back is coming to your town 5 out of 32 teams. You know what I mean? There's 5 dudes, 32 teams. Some of them ain't drafting a running back, so maybe it's 5 and 25. It's like a 20% chance that you're going to get fucking killed. And then another 5 or 10, good backs are coming, that's another 50%. You're well over a 50% chance that a lot of these backs are going to get serious competition in their backfield. And that includes even guys we like. And it doesn't matter if it's Chase Brown and we like him, I like him, Chuba Hubbard, whomever, right? All these guys, Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson, just go on down the list, and so maybe swapping these guys for one another and trying to pick the one you like better and, making some moves around these guys is not a bad way to go. So there it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and it's draft season's always so much fun, Jax. Just doing up the show sheets. I'm having a good time, just getting ready for the show. The anticipation is flowing. I'm talking about these rookies here, Jax. Anybody who isn't already signed up, please go sign up for our Patreon, because shortly after the draft, we will be dropping our rookie rankings. Also, later this week, for the patrons only, I'm going to be dropping our pre-draft rookie rankings, just as kind of a cherry on top there, because I wanted to. So those are coming pre-draft just for funsies, and then post-draft you'll get the realness of those post-draft ranks to go into your rookie draft. So hope you like those. Go check out the Discord. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check us out on your audio platforms. Check us out on social media. For Jax, for Joe Quavius, who wasn't able to make it tonight, I am Trav. We will see you next week. Peace.